All right. Welcome to RCAM. I'm your host, Ryan, and thank you for tuning in today. So, today we have on our show two guests, my friend Bella and my friend Kenny. Thank you guys for joining us today. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Happy to
Great.
be here.
Good, good, good. So, I am glad that you guys joined us, and I think the church bells queuing right in the background is like perfect timing. So, I couldn't have had a better intro. So I'm really excited for this conversation. So I've been talking to Bella for a while now, and I'm just getting to know Kenny, and these two have a pretty really fascinating story that I think needs to be told, and I think needs to be heard, and I think a lot of people are going to be able to connect with this. So Bella, you used to be more liberal minded, and your worldview has changed quite a bit. I would say probably in the last year. Is that correct?
Definitely. Yeah. The last couple years, but I came out more publicly within the last year for sure.
So tell me about this because I think one to be public about kind of your beliefs is a challenging thing in our culture, especially with people being canceled left and right for I mean things that are just so uh, I don't know, mild, that you wouldn't imagine people being canceled for. I mean, there's maple syrup being canceled. There's Mr. Potato Potato Head being canceled. But I do think it takes a degree of courage to actually, speak up in a world because there's a lot of pressure for us to be quiet and to not say what we think. Even if my I guess political opponents or people of the opposite faith, I don't agree with what they say. I still would love to hear from them,
Right.
and I think that's something that is not happening, and we are getting kind of sucked into these echo chambers through social media. But I think it takes people of courage to kind of break through and speak their mind, even when the odds are kind of stacked against them. So tell us a little bit about how you came out of liberalism.
Yeah. So, um, I was never one to be like involved in politics. I never followed it. I never had an interest in it really. Um, it kind of started when I went to college. So I went to college. I was on all social media, and that's an important detail. So I was on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, um, and Tumblr. And I think that was like the main ones at the time. Um, so I was just heavily on all of those. And I was just starting college, and I was doing fashion merchandising, so it had nothing to do with any of that. Um, but I kind of got sucked into basically an echo chamber, like you said. So social media, it it was kind of the biggest thing that was shaping my mind, and I didn't know at the time that what I was seeing was actually political because I didn't have an interest in politics. I didn't care really. And I felt that I wouldn't even understand it if I tried. So it was the last thing on my mind. Um, but just using all of these social networks, slowly over time, and then also in college I was learning about feminism, and I was learning about the gender, all these different things that I was just being kind of newly introduced to, and they were being presented to me as number one, facts, and number two, just kind of like, if you are a good person, if you have a sense of morality, then you would agree with these things. So it's not a matter of opinion. It's kind of like, if you're a decent person, you would want everybody to be paid equally, and you're a woman, and you're Puerto Rican and Cuban, so you're a minority. So it was kind of presented to me in that way. It wasn't really a matter of like, here's two sides, and you kind of get an opportunity to make your own decision. So at the time, I didn't know that. So I was just kind of using social media as a lot of people my age and younger do. And I think that's important to note, because there are so many people that were just like me and really had no idea that what they were being exposed to is actually political, and there's another side to it that's completely being censored. So that was kind of my introduction into liberalism, which at the time I didn't even know the word. I didn't know left or right, nothing. So that was kind of it. And I was seeing these short videos where people were being harassed, appearingly harassed by the cops. And these videos were like less than 5 minutes long. They had captions that were very easy to understand. And it's all now, now that I look back, I see that all of that is intentional. Because for somebody like me who didn't know anything about politics, who didn't know, like, I couldn't even hold a conversation about policies or anything. This is a video or a post or whatever that's very simplified, very broken down. Anybody could understand it, and it invokes an emotional reaction. And that's how I got sucked into it, because, everybody wants to be a decent person. Everybody wants to be a good person. And that's, I think, why I feel so passionate about it, because it really, these people who know way more than us and know what they're doing, they know our psychology. They basically, they prey on people who want to be good people and want to have a sense of activism. They want to feel like they're doing something good with their lives, and that is their perfect target. And that's why you see it happening in college campuses, because they're so, college kids are so vulnerable. They want to belong, and that's, I fell right into that trap.
I think too, they're filling a void that, a lot of people have. They go into college, they don't really know who they are, and now you have these liberal universities kind of shaping them and molding them and giving them kind of a sense of purpose, where of course they're gonna latch onto it. I remember my first 2 years of college, it was very liberal, and I didn't really know the difference. I didn't even like I went to I actually studied liberal arts, and I didn't really think anything of it. I would always call myself a Democrat, and I didn't even really know what that meant. All I knew of Democrat and Republican, or liberals and conservatives, is Democrats are for the poor and Republicans are for the rich. And that was it. That was the extent of my political knowledge. So of course I was always voting Democrat. They're for the poor, I'm poor. That's what I'm going to do, and that's what I did for a long time.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really how I was kind of sucked into it, really. I had no idea, but what I was learning was actually completely political. And I actually, now that I look back, it's crazy. It's already 2021. I started, kind of believing that in around like 2013. So it was many years where I was very much in that, and I was just getting deeper and deeper and deeper into it. I have family members who are Republican, and we would get in crazy heated arguments, and I was so passionate about it. And it really does brainwash you, like, especially when it's coming from all angles. You see it on TV, you see it in the social media, you learn it in school, and now I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but it's also in church. And that, and it's like, it's really crazy, because my biggest thing is, I don't care if you believe what you believe, but you should be able to say that you came to that belief on your own. And I didn't. I never had the opportunity. And there's so many people who are the same, and they never had the opportunity to really form their own beliefs, because it was kind of that opportunity to do that was robbed by, them being brainwashed by all these things.
So what ultimately red pilled you? What kind of started shifting your worldview to make you kind of see like, hey, there's something off here?
Yeah. So I can recall, I've always, it's interesting now to look back, but I've always been one to kind of notice things that other people don't. So I notice when certain things become trending, and certain things, like, now all of a sudden everybody cares. At the time, I just went with it, but it makes more sense now. So back then, I was noticing they would be like in the media, they would highlight stories about, like, for example, like, I can't even remember these celebrities who would dress their kids in like whatever clothing they wanted to wear. So little boys would be wearing little girl clothes and little girls vice versa. And they would it was kind of like a lot of celebrities they were highlighting that were raising their kids gender neutral. And the whole thing kind of started with, oh, there's no such thing as girl colors and boy colors. There's no such thing as girl clothes and boy clothes. Those are just societal gender norms. They're kind of made up. They don't really exist. And I kind of agreed with that. And I still do think that that's true to a certain extent, but there's obviously, deeper things that go with it. But, obviously it's not scientific that girl is pink and boy is blue. It's just kind of, so I accepted that at the time. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. I didn't really know how I felt about raising kids completely gender neutral. I was like, kind of like, but yeah, sure. We can agree at a very simplistic level that those things are gender norms. Fine.
Okay.
So, right. So that's kind of how it started. And then it kind of started progressing to now, because I always identified with wearing boy clothes as a little girl, and because I always wanted to play with boy toys as a little girl, now I'm transgender. And that's why I feel that I was born in the wrong body and I was supposed to be a boy. So now I'm like, I was confused hearing that, because these are the same things that just like a year or two ago, I was being told by social media and by TV and all this stuff and celebrities that that's a gender norm that doesn't exist. So how can you now use these gender norms to kind of justify your reasoning for being transgender? So that question always stuck with me. And it really, at the time, it bothered me that I even had that question, which is interesting now to think about, because I didn't want to have that question. And that just goes to show how deep the indoctrination goes, because I felt guilty for even having that question. Because I was, I learned that if you have any question about that, then you're a transphobe. And I don't hate anybody. I don't want to be perceived as, a phobe. But
I think that's the first kind of tactic too they use to try to disarm or scare people, is they label you phobic. One, a phobia is being afraid of something. I'm not afraid of trans people or anyone really. That has nothing to do with that. I happen to not agree with that lifestyle. And I think that should be fine. You don't call someone a phobe, like there are lots of people that they don't agree with Christianity. I don't call them Christian phobes,
Exactly. And I would never condone like an attack on them, or anything that would physically harm them, or anything like that they say is like a direct result of being a transphobe or any kind of phobe. But I had that little seed of doubt in my mind, and I could never figure it out, because I am always one who questions things also. But for some reason, that one thing, I couldn't figure it out. And I had a lot of doubt and a lot of guilt for having that question in my mind. So that kind of led me to wanting to research it. And I remember wanting to research it because my first assumption was, I'm just not informed. So that's why I don't know the answer. It's not because it's makes no sense. It's because I just don't know the answer. So I have to find out the answer so I can be informed. So I'm going to go inform myself. And that's another thing that they do. If you don't know the answer, or if you don't understand, then you're just not informed. So I went and I was looking, and I wanted, in my mind, I was like, I wish that I could just find something that presents both sides. I want to hear like a debate. I want to hear, the pro and the anti, and I just want to hear which one rationalizes it better. And I went on YouTube, and I don't even remember what I searched exactly, but I believe that God led me to a certain YouTube channel. I won't even say the name, but basically it was exactly what I was looking for. It was a debate one side versus the other, and that totally, I mean, obviously you see what side won, but after that I was just like, it I'll never forget the way I felt watching it, because it was like, oh my God, it was just like relief. It was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, it's like back to reality. Like, it just felt like I had been lost, and now I'm just seeing reality again. So after that, I was just, and it was like maybe over an hour long, the video. And I watched the whole entire thing, and it just blew my mind, because it was the first time that I had ever even seen the other side, and I didn't even know that there was one. So I was just mind blown. And imagine that was after years of not even hearing that there was another side. So I was just like, wow, this is great. And I started watching all of the videos on that channel. And from there, that's just where slowly it was like I feel like it was like a giant knot in my mind that was just being untangled little by little. And that's how
Wow. Huh. Yeah, I remember I kind of going through similar feelings too, because for they were presented with me. I'm like, all right, let me not be closed-minded. Maybe there's just something I'm not seeing. Let me do the research. But the more I research it, I'm like, this just doesn't make any sense. Like I keep trying to wrap my head around it, but it just didn't make any sense. Especially when it came to like gender being a social construct, and then them using that as the basis to justify being a member of the opposite sex. I'm like, that I don't get it. And I realized that I was trying to rationalize something that like just wasn't rational, honestly. And I don't mean that in a hurtful way, but it didn't make any sense, because it doesn't make any sense, because we're literally denying reality when we're trying to change it to make ourselves feel more comfortable. And I think I had some moments that really made me see like, oh, this is more of a problem than I thought it was going to be. And it's actually when we signed my daughter's birth certificate, because we saw the it said male, female, and then another option, but then it also said assigned sex, and I'm like, oh man, no, sex is not assigned. That's something that that we're born with, and yeah, it just kind of the more I dug into it, the more I just was like, no, like I'm not crazy. Like what we were taught in biology is still true. What God's word said is still true, and it's everybody else that is kind of just going off the deep end right now. And I think too, largely because people won't challenge them, and or they won't try to speak into their lives, and not at, I wouldn't, like, my motives is not to hurt someone's feelings, but it's to ground them in the truth, and to help them become comfortable with who they were actually born as. I think that is actually a compassionate thing to do. So I think a lot of it too is trying to warp our motives. Our motives don't come from hate. They come from like a deep compassion for that person. I can imagine what it'd be like born thinking I was the member of an opposite sex. That's got to be an awful thing to go through. And I think Christians should be very loving and kind, but also not waver from the truth, because that person might, that day might need you to actually, say, hey, like, I love you to pieces, but I don't agree with this. And that might be enough to make them think a little bit differently about their situation, because they're not going to hear it from the rest of the world. The rest of the world is going to affirm them, and basically and foster that, and have no pushback. So Kenny, so I know that you played a role in kind of in Bella kind of yeah, I guess coming to faith and kind of unpacking some of this. What was your involvement in all of this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I grew up in the hood, a very rough neighborhood, Lower East Side in the 90s. And most people, which is kind of funny, because when you talk to liberals and you talk to a lot of these people who are social justice warriors, or whatever they want to refer to themselves as, um, a lot of them actually don't live in the rough neighborhoods of which they're trying to protect or come from those places. Um, in my honest opinion and sort of kind of interactions that I've had with people, because most of the people from where I grew up, they don't care about politics. There's a lot more machismo, and there's a lot more sort of a, we're stuck here kind of a mentality. Like we're just stuck here. We're gonna do what everyone else does to get by day to day. So if that means joining a gang, if that means selling drugs, if that means being a violent person, whatever it is, to get to survive where you're from, that's sort of the mentality. These no one cares who's elected president, but somehow we're all kind of forced into thinking that because we're poor and because we live in the projects, the people who give us Section 8 and food stamps and welfare and all this good stuff are the Democrats. So these are the good guys. Republicans want to take that away from us. We already live in pretty crappy conditions. If a Republican becomes president, now we're going to be worse off. So that's kind of the mentality of growing up in a place like that, because we don't care. You have things like, where BLM, if you look at their charter, a lot of the things that they like to push is sort of deconstructing the nuclear family, right? I don't know if that's on their website now, but it was. And that's,
No, they scrubbed that.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they ended up scrubbing it, but it was there for sure.
It's one of those things where they're pushing agendas of, like, the most endangered black person in the world is a transgender black person, whatever. Like, these are, these, you can tell that their agendas or the things that they're pushing aren't really helping anybody from the neighborhoods and the people who get into these altercations with the police. They're not really pushing an agenda to fix that in any way, shape, or form. And it's kind of interesting because we're taught to believe that because they're championing, people from the areas where you grew up, where people like me grew up, and they're championing, because it's kind of funny because, like, when you grow up in a rough area, you have such a distrust for police anyway that it's so easy to be sort of swayed into thinking that every person that has a negative interaction with a cop is automatically the good guy. The cops,
Yeah.
But I grew up around dangerous people. My friends were dangerous people. My family, I had family members who were deported for being so bad, basically. And I think to myself, like, it's funny because I think, like, every interaction that they've had with police was their own fault. It's not because the cops just come and harass anybody. Yeah, they come to harass people who are already up to no good. Like, you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, if you don't grow up in that, you don't understand that. You think that we're victims, but we're not really victims. We're victims of maybe the environment that we're in, because we don't do anything to change that ourselves. If we're trapped in this crappy project, we could do better. We could stop killing each other. We could stop doing drugs. We could stop doing.
And you would think too that one of the main motives of BLM would be to help solve, I think, one of the biggest problems that actually, I do think it's one of the single greatest things that we're facing right now as a country, and that's fatherlessness. Absolutely. Absent fathers in the home. And fathers being in the home makes such a remarkable difference in everything. It reduces the incarceration rate, homicide rates, abortion rates, everything, because people, kids need a strong father figure in the home. And I think that makes such a huge difference. And it just surprises me they don't tackle that.
Right. I tell people all the time that the greatest privilege that I have is having a father, or having had a father who was there my entire life, who was there to take us bike riding, who was there to like. I thank my parents for a lot because I think of my family members who I grew up with, who were like my brothers, and the basically the way that their life went versus the way that my life went, and the only difference between me and them were parenting. You know, because we lived 30 feet away from each other. Like, you know, we lived in the same neighborhood. We had the same challenges that we faced. None of our parents were rich. We lived in the same dangerous neighborhoods. We went to the same schools. We went to the same everything. But my parents did a better job in kind of telling me, like, you know, what to focus on. My parents were very present. So, like, I did really well in school. And that was kind of a main theme for most of my life, was up until I got into college, which is kind of nice because I didn't have to deal with indoctrination. You know, I left college. I got, you know, that didn't work out for me.
Yeah. Man, I could go on a whole rabbit trail with college.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, for me, it was kind of easy because I started bartending really young. And eventually I just started making more money than teachers. And I was just like, this makes no sense. And I was also heavily involved in the music industry. I was a
That's cool.
singer and a hip hop artist for the better part of like 10 years. And I had some successes. I still do it from time to time. I'm actually I'm actually leaning towards Christian music now. Maybe start a career there. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of heavily involved in that kind of stuff, so I didn't have to deal with the indoctrination thing. But just to basically bring it back to my upbringing, growing up in a primarily immigrant household, like I'm first generation. My parents came here in the 80s. You get a sense of like conservative values already just instilled into you because, you know, most people from, you know, Dominican Republic are super conservative.
And they don't even know it.
They don't even know it. It's funny. They get here automatically, you know, they get on social programs and all of a sudden they're Democrat. They have to be Democrat. It is what it is. And I think that's kind of what happens to a lot of people who come here, is that they only vote based on what they're getting from the government, you know. So my family will always be liberal. Why? Because they, you know, they see all these things that the Democrats do that seem like they're good for people who are poor, for immigrants, for all this kind of stuff, and they don't do any further research into what these programs actually do to people. You know, whether it's all these incentives that cause, you know, single motherhood homes, all these incentives that cause, you know, like even open border policies, which cause, you know, a lot of human trafficking, a lot of drugs to get into across the border really easily. Sort of like they don't understand the fact that a lot of the things that the Democrats do is to maintain power. So they want to bring, you know, a lot of illegal immigrants into here. They want to naturalize them. They want to give them everything right off the bat, put them on social programs right away, because there's a lot of incentives that sort of keep you controlled and poor, and that's kind of what they, you know. And I didn't realize that until basically her, because she was the one who put me onto. She didn't want to say the channel, but Steven Crowder. You know?
Yeah, I love Steven Crowder.
Steven Crowder's great.
I don't agree with every single thing that he says and does, so I didn't want to make it seem like I was endorsing him, but
I can say that I agree with like 99% of the things that he says and does.
I think I love Steven Crowder because I love his Change My Mind segments probably the most. His regular show, sometimes I just think he's like a little, I don't know, like brash sometimes.
Yeah.
But forgivable because of, you know, like he does a lot of great, like I don't know, like things just to challenge people's way of seeing things. Like the Change My Mind was revolutionary for me. I'm like, oh wow. and it's like, and it's unedited, and he just sits down, you hear both sides, and that's profound. And I think a lot of people actually from those change my mind segments actually started to see the other side, much like you, Bella, and change their perspectives on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's super important to be able to have these dialogues. It's kind of funny because being on the right, you kind of hear this all the time. We're living in an Orwellian society, but it's getting more and more like that because, you know, um, and like I said, having grown up with conservative values and all this, growing up in a Catholic household, obviously I moved away from that and came back to being a Christian again. You kind of can see where the BS is, when most of the stuff that you're brought up with is very traditional. As parents, you should correct what it is that's your kids are doing. Your kids should not raise themselves.
Yeah, we
That's
got to be a guide.
you have to be a guide, right? So like a lot of this thing where people are playing this whole little game where they're like, I'm gonna let my child decide what sex they are. I'm gonna let them decide, when if they want to start taking hormones or any of that kind of stuff really young. Puberty blockers really young. And then I'm just thinking to myself, like, you wouldn't trust your kid to pour a bowl of cereal. So how is it that you're now deciding that this is the things that kids get to decide when they're
And that's such an abstract concept. Like me as an adult, that's a difficult concept to grasp. And now we're trying to tell kids that they can do this.
Right.
It's just not good. And kids too, they need stuff that's concrete. They need like these are glasses.
Yeah.
This is a phone. They can't understand abstract concepts like that. Gender alone, just even their own gender, they don't understand at that time.
Right, absolutely. And it's like I always think about it like this. Like I know how we were raised, how my family was raised, and I had, you can't stop an adult from making decisions. You can't, and I feel like this, guiding your kids towards what we call gender norms, or what they've labeled to be gender norms, isn't necessarily a bad thing, because
No.
like if
and that's the thing, they take the gender norms and they turn it into a negative. Like, just because it exists, sure, it's a societal thing that for the most part, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And that's where it becomes
like that's sort of like my problem with even sort of like, again, this all comes back to growing up as a conservative but voting Democrat. I never voted, actually. I voted in the last election was the first time I ever voted. That's how far removed from politics I was, and most people that I knew were pretty far removed from politics.
I want to change gears real quick. You had mentioned earlier about kind of coming to faith, and I would love to hear a little bit more about that, and also you too, Bella. Kind of how the both of you guys kind of found, I guess, I guess Christ, and how that's kind of changed everything.
Yeah. Do you want to start? Because I mean, I owe it all to her. Honestly. Well, I guess I can start.
You can go into your background a little bit.
Yeah. So I grew up as a Catholic, and pretty early on I left the faith. I had a lot of questions as a kid, as I was growing up. A lot of questions that seemed to be completely unanswered in the Catholic faith, and I kind of went my own way, but it's kind of human nature to always want to have spirituality and seek spirituality in a way. So I want to say in my early 20s, I kind of started to seek other things, and I came across sort of like this new age form of spirituality, where people are manifesting things into life, believing that you are your own god. Sacred geometry, which is this whole other thing. I mean, it's I don't even understand how I came to that conclusion that was going to be, but again, it's one of those things that as humans we have this spiritual need, and we need something to fill it.
Yeah.
I'm like fully covered in tattoos of sacred geometry because I thought I found the answers. And I had done a lot of research in these sort of different religions and different ideas and different ideologies, just because I wanted to disprove God. Like, that just was an issue of mine where I was not happy with the Christian God. The God of the Bible to me was not someone who I believed had our best interest. So I didn't agree with it. And I did everything possible to get away from that. And then I met Bella 3 years ago. And she challenged me more than anyone had ever challenged me before, like 100%. And we had a lot of conversations, and it kind of started with her asking me to go to church with her, and I entertained the idea. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. We ended up going to Hillsong,
Okay.
which was, now that I know, not the greatest place to start.
It was
It was a start, though.
It was a start. Yeah, it was definitely a start. And we went, and I liked the message. I was like, this is nice. Like, I could understand why people get behind this, because, these they're saying some really inspiring and helpful things. So I was like, okay, cool. That's pretty cool. This is a different experience than the Catholic Church that I, grew up going to. And then, I kind of just continued on with my secular path, where I just didn't care about anything. Like, I mean, that's kind of the atheist that I was. It was very Nietzsche-like, where I didn't, it was more anarchy, where it was just like, we have no purpose. We're here accidentally. What is the point of anything? We're just live your life. It doesn't matter. Because, what's to say that somebody's movement is better than the other person's movement? What's to say that somebody's way of living is better than this person not agreeing with the way that they live? It doesn't matter, because if we're all here accidentally, then what's the point of any of this? And that's kind of where my mind was at. And that's kind of where I started to delve into all these other weird spiritualities. And so she would always tell me that she was, a devout Christian. And I had never met somebody like that before, because she really cared about her faith. And I remember distinctly telling her, I was like, I know so much about your religion and about all these other things that I'm going to talk you out of being a Christian.
He said, if I told you everything that I knew, you would turn into an atheist.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right.
She was just like, okay.
Try it then.
And I kind of knew, that it was really important to her, so I didn't. I didn't go into that. So we didn't really talk about religion. But she would always be like, that it was really important for us both to have faith. And I was like, I would always say things like, so you would leave me, knowing how good I am to you, you would leave me because I don't believe in God. And she was like, no, but it would be hard for me because, I really know the truth, and I want you to share in that with me. So I gave her chances. I went to church with her a few times, but it never really stuck. It just never stuck. And then one day we were having an argument in my bedroom, and she was like, why is it that you don't believe? Like, what proof do I have to give you? And I was like, you have to show me something that proves Christianity is real, that is not from a Christian. And then thinking about it now, I'm like, that is probably the dumbest thing in the world that I've ever said, because if you knew the truth, why would you not be a Christian? Why would you promote Christianity and not be a Christian? So she started showing me a lot of different things, and eventually I was just like, yeah, you're full of it. I still don't believe. And then one day she was just like, we had, we were, it was such a random conversation. It wasn't even anything profound or anything, but she had told me if I had the faith the size of a mustard seed, that that is enough for God to do anything with you. So she was just like, one day she was like, just challenge God, just for me, just challenge God. And I was like, I love her, and I'll do this for her. I'll do this for her. This wasn't for me. This wasn't for my relationship with God. It wasn't for anything but her. So I did, and I kind of humbled myself a bit, which is something that I never. I was very egotistical. I did not want to humble myself for anything, because, again, my life was like, I am the God of my universe. No one can tell me anything. I'm not humbling myself before anybody. I manifest everything that happens in my life. I was the one that made everything happen for myself. Like, that's the kind of person I was.
And that was because when we would get into these debates, it was like it didn't matter how much I presented, how much information, and I think that I held my own pretty well. But it didn't matter, because it was kind of, for him, it was like he had his mind made up before anything, and nothing was really going to change that. So I knew that the only thing that could possibly change it is if he actually encountered God himself. And the questions, I can't remember specifically now, but he would ask me a lot of questions that sometimes the answer, although there is an answer, it couldn't be an answer that he would have wanted to hear, because I've encountered God so many times in my life. So that would be the answer. It would be like, I'm sorry, that's the answer. I've encountered him. I've spoken to him. I've heard from him multiple times. We have a relationship. And this non-believer, it sounds crazy. You can't say that.
Unfortunately, to a non-believer, personal antidote is
right
a thing.
But if that's the answer, it's the answer. So I was just like, you know what? And that's what I meant by challenge God. Just challenge him. Just tell him, just muster up the smallest amount of faith, just that little bit, and just tell him, basically, show me yourself. And that's it, and just see what happens. And that was a big test of faith for me also, because I didn't know what was going to happen. It was just kind of like, this is all I can say to you at this point. It's like, you have to encounter him yourself, because I've given you everything that I can. I've given you all this information. I've given you Christian sources, non-Christian sources. I mean, we can go on, but at the end of the day, if you don't encounter God yourself, that's what you personally need. And that's what I told him.
And it was funny, because for me, this was basically just like, when she asked me to do that, I was, in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm expecting nothing to happen. Nothing's gonna happen. So this puts an end to it. If nothing happens, then I'm right, and we don't have to talk about this ever again. But if something does happen, then I literally said to myself, I was like, if something happens, I have to give up my life, and I'm gonna follow Christ. Like, that's it. Like, those were my. I was like, it has to be very extreme. It's either one.
Yeah, I'm getting hyped right now.
It's like, I'm a person of extremes. I was just like, it's one way or the other. That's it. And I was like, because if it is true, then this is the truth, and I need to follow the truth. There's no reason to deny the truth. So I remember just like sitting in my room, and I was just like, I don't know if it was the night of having this conversation, or maybe a few days afterwards, or whatever. But I remember just sitting down and just asking God and being like, look, we haven't talked in a long time, and if you are real, and if you really have been doing things in my life to keep me afloat, whatever it is, show yourself. You present yourself to me in whatever way that you can, proving that the Christian God is God, and who I'm talking to right now is Jesus Christ, show me, or else I'm walking away. It's that simple. And I had a little bit of faith that something would happen. But part of me was just so distant from God that I thought it was just going to be like, nothing's going to happen. So it all happened kind of funny because literally maybe the next day I'm in Queens somewhere. And I was on my way to work. And I'm walking through a part of Queens that I've never been. I work in Manhattan. I grew up in Manhattan. It's a helicopter.
Cool.
Right above us. Anyway, so I grew up in Manhattan. I lived in Manhattan. I worked in Manhattan. And I was in the part of Queens for some reason. I don't know. I don't even remember why I was in Queens. And I'm walking down the street, and I remember... actually, no, that was the last encounter. There was 2 different things before that. Right.
Three times.
3 times. So the first time, actually, we were watching QVC at my parents' house. And it was me, my mom, and my dad. And the item that was being sold was this giant Christian, it was giant crucifix earrings. And then I was just like, okay, this is just a coincidence. This isn't my end all be all. Like, just because I saw a cross on TV after I prayed for a sign doesn't mean that is the time. So I was like, okay, I'm going to dismiss this. It is what it is. So the next day, or maybe 2 days afterwards, my mom comes home and tells me a really strange story. She goes, I was at the dentist today, and during my they were removing a tooth to put in a crown or something. She was like, they came into the room and they stopped what they were doing, and a priest came in and was praying with us. And I was just like,
yeah, that's a weird. That's strange.
I was like, at the dentist, there's just a random priest that had to stop you specifically to pray. And she started crying because this was around the time we were dealing with a lot of different things with the health of my dad, and she was telling the story, and I was like, okay, now this is a little weird, because of all places, a dentist. I mean, I would expect this at a hospital. I would expect this at a church.
And your family was really that was a rough time.
And yeah, it was a really rough time that we were going through. And it was really weird. So my ears were kind of perking up because I was like, this is weird. And then I was like, but that's still not enough for me. So I started walking. This is when I was in Queens now. I was in a random part of Queens, and I was walking to the train station or something, and this random guy in the street hands me a card, and I wasn't paying attention to what the card was. I just grabbed it and I kept going. I never take cards. I'm like, get away from me. Don't give me anything. That's always been me. I don't take cards. I took this card, and I'm walking, and I decide to flip this card, and there's just a giant cross on the card. That was it. There was nothing else on the card. It was just a cross. And I was just like, you got me. I don't know what else to say. I asked for signs that you are the Christian God, and 3 times the earrings.
And this was back to back.
This was in a week. That same week that I had asked for that. It just, you have the earrings, you have the priest, and then this random cross on the card. And I was just like, I can't even deny this anymore. What else do I need? Do I need God to just slap me in the face? I don't at that moment, I was just like, I have to believe. I made a promise to God when I asked him to give me a sign, and he gave me 3 signs that I would be a follower. And from that moment on, I kind of was just like, my life is in your hands. I can't deny it. There's yeah, it was very interesting.
That's incredible, man. That's just awesome and really beautiful. And I love how God uses threes to make a point too. On the third day he rose.
Yeah.
So I think that is awesome.
Sorry, I just want to add, because for me, like I said, it was definitely a huge test of my faith also. And the fact that he, not only was he an atheist, but he was, I mean, oh man,
I was
he
off
was
the deep
like,
end.
he had like an emotional, just like, he really had anger towards Christians, towards God, towards just Christianity as a whole. And
Sorry to interrupt, but it is
Yeah.
kind of funny that when we were talking earlier, you said that you brought up, Saul, who eventually became Paul. I have that same connection with Paul
yeah,
because I hated Christians.
yeah,
There was no other religion that I felt this way about. I didn't like all other religions, but for some reason I hated anything related to Christ.
yeah,
It was just in me to do that. And it's kind of funny because she always thought that I had like, and this might get a little too far fetched for people who aren't believers,
It's okay.
but she always thought that I was surrounded by evil spirits.
that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, she was gonna get into
Yeah,
it. I'll
because
let her tell it.
yeah, because I mean, and you can talk about it also, because it was both of us. We would experience this. Like, I would be with him. I would stay at his house sometimes. We didn't live together at the time, and he would have like these. It was like these nightmares, or like he would, in the middle of the night. First of all, before anything, when I would stay there, a lot of the time I would even just wake up, even if he was like asleep. I would kind of wake up and just feel very uneasy in his room. And I've always kind of been the type of person, like, again, it might sound far-fetched to a lot of people, but I think I'm sensitive to certain like spirits and that kind of thing. So in his room, I would always say that. I would always be like, there's just a not a good presence like in this room, and I would feel it all the time. And I would just wake up and start praying, literally, because I would feel very uncomfortable. I would just feel like there was just something wrong in there. And then he also would get like these nightmares, and like he would be shaking like he was having a seizure. I would call it like his nightly
Wow.
seizure. His body would be shaking. And I, around that time, especially when when I told him to challenge God and everything, he was having them a lot, and I would wake up and I would literally put my hands on him, and I would put my hand on his head and be like, God, please heal his mind. And I would put my hand like on his chest, and just like I would be praying over him as this was happening, because I just felt like he was being attacked. And that would happen all the time. And it's just crazy. Now it doesn't happen anymore. So it's like,
I haven't had a dream like that since I like fully committed to being a Christian. And
Yeah.
and if they used to be, I used to tell her all the time. I like, she would be like, you were having like literal seizures while you were sleeping, and I would be like, yeah, no, because I was trying to escape something that was trying to kill me in my dreams, and it would always be like some weird demonic thing in my dream that was either choking me or like on me or something. So
Yeah.
this is like, and I say this as someone who like didn't believe in that kind of stuff, and prior to like us even being in a relationship, that was something that would happen to me all the time, is that I would wake up in a dream, or what felt like it was a dream, and there was something attacking me always, like for the longest time that I could remember.
It's so weird how much of your story kind of parallels mine. So one, I also had my wife bring me into the faith. She started talking to me about Jesus, And at the time, I thought she was one. I thought she was crazy. I was like, okay, well, she's a
Yeah.
little weird, but she's cute, so I'm gonna go to church. I'll check it out. And it wasn't long after being in church that I had an encounter with Christ, and I realized, like, no, this is real. Like he is real, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But I also had moments where I mean, I felt like I was being attacked by a demon while I was sleeping. Sleep paralysis is what people call it, but it was like this black thing over me, and like choking me, and I'm like suffocating, like trying to break free of it. So that I mean, I know what you're talking about because that happened to me.
Yeah. And I could always make it out. It was always kind of the same thing. It was sort of like this. It looked like the girl from The Ring, and it was always the same. It was always the same thing over and over. And I didn't realize the extent of what my body looked like when I was trying to muscle my way out of a dream like this, until she was there with me, and she would tell me how aggressively I was shaking, and like she thought that she would be scared, she would be terrified when I woke up, because she was like, are you okay, were you having a seizure? And I was like, no, I was trying to get out of a dream. Like that would be my response every single time. It's like, I'm trying to get out of a dream, it's just something weird. And then I was having a lot of spiritual attacks as I was trying to get into my faith. So one of the funny stories that I like to tell her, because it happened while we were together, left bartending for a little bit, and I started to work for the United States Postal Service. I did that for like 2 weeks. And funny enough, the person who was training me was this lady. She was really weird, but she took a liking to me really quick, like super, super quick. And she was so comfortable that she would tell me that she manifests spirits in her, and that she becomes different people. She told me that she was Saint Michael, and she would show me pictures of her possessed by Saint Michael, and say that her face would change and like all these things. And then one day she was like on her phone with her boyfriend or somewhere. I don't know. He was her boyfriend, but he wasn't living in the States. I mean, in New York, he was living in like Florida or something. And they were on the phone with me, and she was like, "Oh, I'm training this new kid, and I can feel his spirit. It's so strong. I was just telling him that he's this ancient warrior." And then he was like, "Oh yeah, I know his name. His name is like Kishasa or some weird name like that." And he was like, "Yeah, he's the white wolf. He's the white wolf of whatever." And then I was thinking to myself, and I was like, where's this wolf talk coming from? Because I have like, I don't know, I have an actual wolf tattooed on me that they've never seen before. No one's ever seen it because it's always covered by my shirt. This is the one tattoo that no one ever sees. And I was like, where's this wolf talk coming from? Like, there's no way they could have possibly seen my tattoo. What the hell are they talking about? Like, what is this? This is weird. Like, this is really weird. And I told her this story. And then back to like
And my reaction,
she was just like, yo, you're literally, that lady is a demon.
I was like, do not talk to her
Don't
anymore.
talk to her anymore. She was like, I was like,
this was already when I was telling him, I think you have some kind of spirits,
Yeah.
around you, or
and this is kind of like, because I tried being a Christian with her like multiple times. It's been a year since it's like stuck for real, where like I encountered God, like when I challenged God. But this was before I challenged God. This was kind of when I was starting to maybe think about,
you're open to it.
Yeah, I was open and receptive to Christianity again. And this was around the time when she started telling me that I was getting these attacks a lot more, like while I was sleeping. So that night when I went home, after this lady had told me that I was this white wolf or whatever, I'm sleeping, and I remember being in this weird, like, trance-like dream. And I remember saying something. I remember something making me say something. that was like I was speaking in another weird language, and I was saying like I am the white wolf or something. It was so weird.
I was there.
And she was there, and she was telling me that I was like speaking in tongues or speaking in a weird way.
He was like switching back and forth.
Switching back from like English into another language, and I was just like, I literally know what you're talking about because this was in my dream. Like this is what I was saying in my dream. So a lot of those attacks were happening, and it's so weird because to encounter that in a random government job that I had, you know, it was such a weird thing to encounter. And that was one of those things that always stuck with me. And then, again, this was before she told me to challenge God. That's when I started to realize that like maybe I did have something that was following me that just did not want me to get closer to God at all. Because it was just like, when I tell you that the attacks were aggressive, they were like aggressive. Like it was something that did not want me to even entertain the idea of having God around. Like it almost seemed like it was just pissed. Like it was so angry that I wanted to talk to God, that I wanted to talk to God. And then again, like I said, it stopped when I fully accepted Jesus into my life. It stopped. Like it literally, to this day, like I thank the Lord because it just never happened again. It hasn't happened. You know, I can't even remember having a dream with anything like that since then. So
sorry,
she's having an attack.
There's a mosquito.
So yeah, I feel like.
But one thing that happened to me that I want to mention was that when this happened, like I think it might have been like the night before, or actually it might have been right after we had one of these arguments. We had like another debate about Christianity and all this stuff, and I would get frustrated because I know you know how it is. So we would really go at it, okay? And it was frustrating because, and especially when it's somebody you care about, like, I really wanted him to understand at least. And it was like, he wasn't even trying to do that. So it was very difficult. And I remember I went to church, and the night before, so it was a Saturday. I remember because the very next day I went to church. So that night, Saturday night, it was just after one of those really intense debates. It was on the phone. I hung up with him, and I was just like, I felt like giving up. Like I really wasn't sure if his mind was ever going to change. And I mean, that's how bad it was. That's how hard-headed he was. He was just like, I did not think that anything would change with him at that point. And I remember praying, and I was kind of confused because I felt like I had to have these conversations with him. I felt like I was being led to do that, and that's why I was doing it. And even before then, like when I have an aunt who is a devout Christian, and she was one of the people who really helped me like develop my faith when I was younger. And she would have conversations with me sometimes, and she liked him, but she would kind of be concerned about it. And she would be like, we do have to be equally yoked, and I know that he's not a believer, and it might cause problems. And she was just concerned about me because she did like him as a person, but she had her concerns about that. And I was just like, I just feel like he was put into my life for a reason. I feel like I was put into his life for a reason. And I just feel like I am being led to have these conversations with him. I don't know why. I mean, I've had previous boyfriends before him, but for some reason with him, I just felt like it was my job to do that. And that night I was just feeling really hopeless, and I was confused because I was like, I'm doing everything that I feel like I'm being led to do. And it's just, I mean, sometimes it felt like it was getting worse, like worse than better. And it was like, it's just getting more fed up. And I felt like it was going to drive a wedge between us because he's like getting angry and I'm getting angry, and it's like turning into real arguments. And I was praying about it, and I was just like, is this even your will? Like, what if it's not your will that he turns into a believer? What if he's just not going to change his mind, and I shouldn't even interfere anymore? Maybe that's that's, you know, what you are trying to show me. Maybe your will is that he just, you know, goes his own way, and I do, and my job is done, really, because I did what I was called to do, and he made his decision. What if that's, you know, what if I should just stop? Like, is it your will? And I remember asking that specific question because that's what was kind of messing with my head. I was like, if it's your will that he doesn't choose this, then I can't do anything about that. So I was just kind of starting to question if I was, you know, if I should even go on. And I said, is this your will? Please just tell me. If it's not, I won't even bring it up anymore. And that was it. And I was crying and I was so upset and I just didn't know what to do. And we all have these moments where, you know, we're trying to follow where God is bringing us and we're trying to do what we feel we're being led to do, and it just seems like nothing is working out. And it's just like this confusion. You start to doubt yourself. You start to doubt your interpretation. Maybe I'm interpreting this wrong, or maybe, you know, all these things going through your mind. So the next morning I went to church, and I cannot even tell you what the message was. I don't remember. This was already like over a year ago, 2 years ago, but the pastor, he, at one point, it was, I mean, basically the gist of what he was saying was like, don't give up, you know, don't give up what you're doing. And he, I mean, it's crazy, but he specifically at this moment, he was looking at me directly. I think he even pointed at me, like where I was sitting in the crowd. And he goes, because it is God's will.
Wow.
It is God's will that you will have this marriage. And it is God's will that you will have, and he was just going on and on, but he looked at me right in that moment and he pointed and he went, it is God's will. And I get chills right now, like even thinking about it, because that, I mean, how much more direct of an answer can you get? That's my exact words. And you know, it was like right there the next morning, I got the answer. And I was just like, all right, well, nothing seems like it's going the way I thought it would, but now I know that I can't give up, that this is, you know, I'm doing the right thing. And that was right before, I think, like all of those other signs happened. So it was very much like an experience for me, because I grew up a Christian. I was a Catholic as a kid, but I left that kind of when I got older, and I just identified myself as a Christian, but I was also not really familiar with the Bible. I didn't really read the Bible that much. There was a lot that I didn't know, and I didn't really have an interest in knowing. And I just thought, like, I'm better than your average person because I'm a Christian, because I pray, because I've encountered God, which I have. But I had kind of this, like, kind of like an arrogance, I guess, but not, I didn't think of myself as better than anybody, but I just thought, like, I was doing enough to go to heaven, and all the other stuff, I didn't need to worry about it. So that was kind of at the stage that I was in still at that time also. So it's like, yes, I was a Christian, but that was also like a huge eye-opener for me, because even though I have encountered God other times in my life, that was just one of the more like direct answers. And it was just, I mean, he literally pointed at me and looked right at me, and it was like he was speaking to me. So
yeah. I think that is just, I don't know, it's profound how God can take like something like that and then work it together for good. So he took your bad situation, Kenny, and then worked it together for good, not just for your good, but for also the good of Bella. And I just think that is awesome, guys. That is a really beautiful testimony. And yeah, I'm glad that you guys took the time to come speak with me tonight and share that. I really appreciate it. So just as I guess just one last thing before we wrap up here. So I guess, how is your faith right now shaping kind of your worldview and how we're processing kind of everything that's happening right now in our culture?
To make it short and sweet, if God doesn't like it, neither do I.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. Good answer.
God, through the past year, 2020, and just a little bit of 2021 so far, we both have literally transformed. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. Um, the way that we view the world now, like I understand what it means to look at the world through a Christian point of view, through the way God wants us to view the world, and He's completely transformed our vision, and we see things now. I feel the way He sees things more, and that is, once you can really say that, it just, I don't know, it changes everything. Like, you just view everything in a totally different way.
I mean, there's so many behaviors that we kind of normalized. Um, you know, that we just thought that as long as we believed in God, we could do these things and it was okay. Um, Sort of things that people do every day. Um, and we've taken such a, and it's even hard for me to believe the change that I personally have made. I could see it coming from her more than me because she's believed for much longer. But
Mm-hmm.
for someone like me who, like, it wasn't that long ago that I was an atheist, um, and this is a true testament of the power of God. Once you start to feel God and know God and want to know God more, um, like, people can't even believe that I am a Christian. Like,
Mm.
I tell people that I'm a Christian now, and they look at me like, "Are you serious? Like, what are you? This that's you're joking, right? Like, this is a joke because the person who I used to be was so far removed from God that even me putting my name in a sentence, speaking about Jesus Christ, and not speaking about God as me being God,
Yeah.
was is like something that people are just like, whoa, that's insane. So I mean, I've stopped so many things because it's almost like when you know God, you start to see how actually you feel dirty, you feel impure in
Yeah.
front of God because of all the things that you used to do and things that you used to normalize, things that you used to think were okay because
And
society deems it okay.
and this is not like, I know a lot of people think that Christianity is about like being shamed into like obedience kind of thing. Like, we felt shameful about our actions, so we, like, it's more, it's just, it goes hand in hand with thinking everything comes back to self, like,
Yeah.
self-importance. That's like the most important thing. It wasn't even like that. I mean, when he says shame, I know you understand, but for anybody who might not really understand that concept, it's like, you it's just love. It's like when you love someone in person, when you love another person, you don't want to do anything that would hurt that person. So it's the same exact thing, but
Yeah.
now it's with God. So God obviously holds us to a higher standard, and there's, when you experience that love, when you experience his love for you and you feel that love in return, or you feel, I mean, as close as we can possibly get to it, because we can't even fathom his love for us, like, you it's just inevitable that you want to do whatever you can to express that love, and you want to stop doing whatever is going to hurt him. And that's really where the shame comes from. It's like all of a sudden you feel naked. It's just like,
Yeah.
you feel
Yeah.
exposed. And
You see God in all of his holiness, and you see where you fall short, and that love for God that God has shown you, you want to reciprocate.
yeah,
And that's what moves you to want to change.
right.
Right.
And the thing is, it's impossible to love as much as God loves us. So that's why it's like a never ending, like, it's a lifelong mission to try to do that. And And when you experience that, you just want to do the best you can, and that means doing whatever you can. And how do you do that? I mean, it's in the Bible. So you follow what the Bible says, and even then you fail, and you want to just keep doing more. It's just about showing your love and your gratitude for God.
It's sort of like in the Old Testament where you used to have the ritualistic rules, right? Where you had to have an untainted lamb because it produced a sweet scent to God when you would sacrifice this lamb. You know, it's sort of like with us, and even in the Old Testament, multiple times you see when anyone encounters God, they bow down. They can't even look at God. They can't even stare at His brilliance because we're not worthy. And it's kind of like that, where you want that, you want to be a sweet scent in everything that you do. You want God to receive you and look at you and be like, wow, you know, you're really trying. There's so many things. And again, people need to understand that it's like when your parents tell you not to do something silly when you're growing up because it's going to harm you. It's the same thing with God. God put these rules in place for us so that we could live and not be not do damage to ourselves, bodily damage, not to do, you know, any kind of damage to ourselves. And obviously, I'm extremely marked up. I have a lot of tattoos. I have all these things. I've put things in my body that, you know, are not good, and all these kinds of things where I'm like, you know, all these none of that stuff was good for me. I know that 2020, you know, hindsight, you know, I understand that all those things that I did that were for momentary pleasure back then, they did nothing for me in the future. They did nothing good for me. So continuing to pursue this lifestyle just because society deems it okay and everyone else is doing it, it hasn't done anything for me. Not as much as casting all of that aside and following God, because I've experienced that. I've experienced what it is to live a completely free life, free from the presence of God,
authority,
free from any authority. No one told me what to do. Why? Because I made my own money. Everything that I did was by myself. There was not one person who could tell me anything. I made my own decisions. I made everything. I lived that life, and I understand that I did more harm to myself living like that than this is the happiest that I've ever been. And it's not because, you know, I joined Christianity because I needed something that was like, you know, you know how people like to view like when people become yogis, right?
Yeah.
You know, I went to yoga because my life was this and that. Like, God found me.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for God. So He came and He called me by name, and He was just like, you know, I'm going to, you know, like I'm going to use you for something. I need you for something. So I'm going to humble myself and prove myself to you that I exist. And all I ask for you is to be obedient. And that's the least that I can do, is be obedient.
right?
That's the least that I can do. There's more that I can do, but that's the least that I can do, is be obedient now that I know the truth. So I don't see these rules as deprivation of anything. It's more of like, God is telling me what to do and what He deems necessary for us to live a good life.
Yeah. And His commandments, I mean, they lead to life. I mean, His commandments are life, you know, and Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And that's what we find in Him. And I think that is just, I don't know, it's amazing, and it's difficult to see when you're on the other side of that, but then when you're in it, you can't help but feel gratitude, you know, from where God brought you from, and it moves you to want to be a better person. It moves you to want to draw closer to Him. It moves you to want to walk according to His ways, even when the rest of the world thinks you're crazy for doing so.
Yeah.
And
that's why
I think
like kind of bringing it back to what you said in the beginning, it's like when I decided to go more public about my change in beliefs. I mean, first of all, not only is it a little bit intimidating because you can get canceled and there's a lot of things that can happen like that, but I was going from posting liberal things to now all of a sudden posting the opposite, and on top of that posting Christian things. And it's like now I have to kind of accept that people are going to view me as like a switcher, like I'm switching sides, but that just comes with it. It's like, for me at least, it came with it, because the transformation that I went through, that I experienced God in that way, it was just like, I have to try to make people understand. I don't even care what people think. I don't even care if people think I'm crazy. I don't even care. And I'm somebody who, I've had a lot of struggles with, I mean, self-esteem and so many things like that. So for me, it's like a huge thing. It's crazy to think that I'm even at this point, but I don't even think about it anymore. I'm just like, whoever's going to receive this, that's who I'm doing it for. Most people won't, and that's fine, but at least they had an opportunity. And that's kind of, it actually kind of goes hand in hand with the way that like conservative things are so censored on media. It's like the same thing with Christianity. People think that they have everything so figured out, but really they just never heard the other side. They never heard the Christian answers to their questions. And I always had a lot of questions about Christianity and God and how he worked and how he operates and everything. But I didn't know that there were answers a lot of the time. And yes, a huge thing, a huge part of it is just, you have to have faith at the end of the day. But at the same time, when something is true, there's an answer. There's answers for everything that is a part of it. And that's also, a lot of the time, you just don't see that. So, so yeah, I just wanted to be that person who could hopefully bring those answers to people who were looking for them. And that's where that bravery came from. I mean, in the beginning it was kind of scary, but it's just only God can make that happen, because it's not about myself anymore. It's just, I'm just doing what I'm called to do.
So I think it's cool though, guys, just you operating in the spheres that you do. I know, like, even just being vocal about some of this stuff, whether it's online or whether it's with somebody in person, I think it's encouraging to not so much the people that you're speaking, like, or maybe debating with, but to other people, to see somebody stand up for courage. All you need is somebody to stand up, and more people want to stand up, and more people want to speak out, and more people want to be vocal about what it is that they really believe, be it Christianity, be it conservative views. I do think it does encourage people, and I think that is really cool. Now, I wanted to talk to you about Live Not by Lies, but I think we will save that for another conversation, because that in itself is, I mean, there's so much we could talk about there. But I did want to thank you guys for coming on the show. And I know, Kenny, you're not on social media, correct?
No, I've walked
probably better that way. But Bella, if you are on social media, can you tell our guests where to follow you at?
Yeah, I have an Instagram page. It's not like very active at the moment, but I am working on another one. But for now, I am La Bella Marie, LA_Bella Marie. And I'm gonna be working on some more stuff there soon. So
cool. All right, awesome. Thank you guys again for coming on the show.
So much.
Yeah, it was awesome, and God bless everybody. Deuces.